The story of God flooding the world and commanding Noah to build an ark is a well-known biblical account from the book of Genesis in the Bible, Genesis chapters 6 to 9. Below is a detailed retelling of the events leading up to the flood. According to the Bible, as humanity grew in number, people turned away from God. Wickedness, violence, and sin spread across the earth. Genesis chapter 6 verse 5 describes this situation. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. God observed that humans had become utterly corrupt, filled with violence, and no longer followed his ways. This grieved God's heart, and he regretted creating humanity and other living creatures. The Bible also mentions the Nephilim, a race of giants born from the union of the sons of God and the daughters of men. These beings further contributed to the corruption and violence on earth. Their presence and actions exacerbated the already dire situation, leading to even greater wickedness and chaos. God decided to cleanse the earth of its corruption by sending a great flood that would destroy all life. The earth was filled with violence, and every inclination of the human heart was only evil all the time. However, one man stood out among the wickedness: Noah. Noah was described as a righteous man who walked faithfully with God. He was blameless among his generation, as stated in Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. God chose Noah because of his faithfulness and obedience. He revealed his plan to Noah and gave him specific instructions to prepare for the coming flood. God saw Noah as a beacon of hope and purity in a world consumed by sin. By choosing Noah, God ensured that humanity would have a chance to start anew, free from the corruption that had plagued the earth. God instructed Noah to build a large boat or ark to save himself, his family, and pairs of animals from the flood. The ark was to be made of gopher wood, a type of durable timber, and constructed with specific dimensions: a length of 300 cubits, which is approximately 450 feet or 137 meters, a width of 50 cubits, which is roughly 75 feet or 23 meters, and a height of 30 cubits, approximately 45 feet or 14 meters. The ark was to have 3 decks, a roof, and a door on its side. Noah was also commanded to coat it inside and out with pitch to make it watertight. The construction was a monumental task, requiring immense effort and perseverance. Noah and his family faced numerous challenges, including sourcing the vast amounts of wood and materials needed. They had to work with primitive tools, often repairing them as they broke, and laboring tirelessly, sometimes through the night, to meet the divine deadline. Additionally, they faced skepticism and ridicule from their community, but Noah's unwavering faith and determination kept them focused on their divine mission. God commanded Noah to bring into the ark pairs of all living creatures, male and female, to preserve their kinds during the flood. Specifically, he instructed Noah to take 2 of every kind of unclean animal, 1 male and 1 female, 7 pairs of clean animals which were used for sacrifices and food after the flood, and 2 of every kind of bird. Noah was also told to gather enough food to sustain himself, his family, and all the animals during their time on the ark. The logistics of gathering such a diverse array of animals were immense. Noah and his family had to build enclosures for each type of animal, ensuring they had enough space and the right conditions. They herded animals from the surrounding regions, guiding them carefully to the ark. This included large mammals, reptiles, and even insects. Additionally, they had to gather and store vast amounts of water to ensure all the animals and people on the ark had enough to drink during the flood. Noah obeyed all of God's commands without question. Noah's family stood by him, helping with the construction despite the challenges. The community often mocked and ridiculed Noah, questioning his sanity and purpose. Yet, Noah's interactions with his family were filled with faith and determination as they supported each other through the ordeal. Together, they remained faithful and completed the ark. When the ark was finished, Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives entered the ark. The animals came as God had instructed. Once everyone was inside, God himself shut the door of the ark. The flood began with torrential rains that pounded the earth relentlessly for 40 days and 40 nights. Simultaneously, the fountains of the great deep erupted violently, releasing torrents of water from beneath the earth's surface. The waters surged higher and higher, engulfing even the tallest mountains, and every living creature outside the ark was swept away in the cataclysm. After 150 days, the waters began to recede, revealing the peaks of mountains. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, a sign of hope and stability. Noah sent out a raven to see if the waters had receded from the ground. Later, he sent out a dove to check if the land was dry. The dove eventually returned with an olive leaf in its beak, a significant symbol of peace and new beginnings. When the ground was dry, God commanded Noah and all those in the ark to come out. Noah built an altar and offered sacrifices to God in gratitude for their deliverance, marking the end of the flood and the beginning of a new era. After the flood, God made a covenant with Noah and all living creatures, promising never to destroy the earth with a flood again. As a sign of this covenant, God set a rainbow in the sky, saying, "Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth." This covenant was not just a promise to Noah, but a pledge to all future generations. While it is a story of destruction, it also conveys hope and renewal for humanity through Noah's faith and God's covenant. This covenant signifies God's enduring commitment to the earth and its inhabitants, ensuring that life would continue and flourish. It serves as a reminder of God's mercy and the importance of faith, obedience, and stewardship for all generations to come. Right, so before the big flood, there were these beings called Nephilim roaming around. They were a bit like giants, really mysterious, and they were said to be the children of angels and humans. They were a big part of the reason why the world became so, naughty. These Nephilim, they were super strong and had loads of influence, and they kind of led everyone down the wrong path. God saw all the violence and bad stuff happening, and a lot of it was because of these Nephilim. They were messing up everything God had planned, and the world was becoming really corrupt. So part of God's plan to clean things up was to get rid of the Nephilim. The story of the Nephilim teaches us about what happens when we don't listen to God. It shows us what can go wrong when we get mixed up with bad influences and how important it is to be good. When God sent the flood, he washed away all the bad stuff and the Nephilim too, so everyone could have a fresh start. The Nephilim story is a bit of a mystery, but it makes the flood story even more interesting, doesn't it? It shows us the battle between good and evil and how sometimes God needs to step in and sort things out. So when Noah and his family left the ark, the world was brand new. People probably forgot about the Nephilim after a while, but the lesson stayed with them. God promised Noah there wouldn't be another flood, and he also promised to guide people to be good, not like the naughty world before. The story of the Nephilim and God's promise to Noah reminds us that God is kind and fair. It reminds us to keep believing in God, even when things are tough. It's like a message to everyone to learn from the past and try to make the future good by following God's plan. Right, let's dive into something really interesting, the historical and archaeological evidence of the Great Flood. We often think of Noah's Ark as just a Bible story, but lots of people have looked for real-world proof of a massive flood like that. Archaeologists and historians have found clues that suggest big floods really did happen way back when. One of the most exciting clues comes from old Mesopotamian stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which also talks about a huge flood. Just like Noah's story, these texts describe a warning from God, building a big boat and saving lives from a giant flood. The similarities make you wonder if these stories come from a shared memory of a real flood that happened long ago. Even the earth itself gives us clues. Scientists have found layers of mud and fossils from sea creatures in places that are now dry land. This means these places used to be underwater. For example, some scientists think a massive flood happened in the Black Sea area around 5600 BC, when water from the Mediterranean Sea broke through a natural dam. This event could have inspired flood stories in different cultures. What's more, some researchers have found archaeological sites that show signs of sudden, disastrous flooding. Digs in the ancient city of Ur, in what's now Iraq, uncovered layers of clay and silt, which could be signs of a big flood. These findings give us a fascinating peek into how real historical events might have shaped the Bible story. While we haven't found Noah's Ark itself, the combination of old records, earth science, and archaeological discoveries keeps scholars and believers interested. These clues encourage us to think about the links between myths and history and how ancient people understood and recorded what happened to them. Exploring the history and archaeology of the Great Flood helps us understand this classic story much better. It reminds us that while some parts of the story might be a mystery, the search for knowledge and truth never ends. So when we think about Noah, the Nephilim, and the Great Flood, we're reminded that humans have always wanted to understand their past and what it can teach us about the future. Right, let's dive into what the flood story means in different religions. We usually think of Noah's Ark and the Bible, but similar stories pop up in other religious books too, each with its own twist. Christians often see the flood as showing God's judgment and forgiveness. It's about humans messing up, God punishing them, but also giving them a second chance. Noah doing what God said, and the rainbow promise show hope and a fresh start between God and people. Jewish people also find Noah's story important. The ark is like a safe place, and the rainbow is God's promise not to flood the world again. The story teaches about fairness, saying sorry, and being good. In Islam, the Quran tells the flood story too, where Noah, called Nuh, is a prophet warning everyone about big trouble. It's about believing, sticking with it, and what happens if you don't listen to God. It reminds us how powerful God is and why we should follow him. Hinduism also has a flood story about Manu, a fish, which is actually the god Vishnu, warns Manu about a huge flood. Manu builds a boat, survives, and then brings people back to earth. This story shows how things are created and destroyed over and over again in Hinduism. These different versions of the flood story show how religions use similar stories to teach their own beliefs. It's interesting to see how cultures think about God getting involved, right and wrong, and how God and humans relate. Whether you think it really happened is a story with a hidden meaning or a spiritual lesson, the flood story is still important in many religions. It reminds us that everyone tries to understand life, especially when things get tough. So, thinking about the flood story, we see it's a big symbol of new beginnings, believing and never giving up. It's a story that goes beyond different times and places and makes us think about what it means to be human. Right, let's chat about what Noah's Ark means today. Even though it's a really old story, it still matters to us now. One big thing it teaches us is about looking after our planet. With all the talk about climate change and pollution, Noah's Ark reminds us to be like Noah and protect the earth. Just like he saved the animals, we need to save our world for everyone in the future. Another lesson is about being prepared. Like the Scouts, Noah built the ark before the big flood came. That shows us how important it is to plan ahead and be ready for anything life throws at us. It's like having a brolly ready for a rainy day, but on a much bigger scale. Noah's story also shows us the power of believing in something and doing what you think is right. Everyone doubted Noah, but he trusted what God told him and built the ark anyway. It's like sticking to your guns even when your mates think you're a bit daft. It teaches us to be brave and follow our beliefs. The story also gives us hope. After the flood, everything started again. It's like hitting the reset button. This reminds us that even when things are really tough, we can always start fresh. It's a new beginning, a bit like getting a new school year after a long summer holiday. And finally, the ark was a safe place. It reminds us to help others who need it. Think about helping people in need, like giving to charity or just lending a hand to a neighbor. It's all about making the world a kinder place. Noah's Ark is a story with lots of important messages. It makes us think about what we do, what we believe, and how we should treat each other and the planet. It's like a guidebook for being a good person. So next time you hear about Noah's Ark, think about how it can help you in your own life. It can teach you to be brave, be prepared, and always have hope. Let's all try to make the world a bit more like the Ark, a safe and happy place for everyone.